In a past episode of Power Hour, we talked about how Texas has been shutting down coal plants and replacing them with mostly wind turbines, and that last summer this led to people being quite worried about blackouts. And we also noted that wind apologists dismissed those concerns, and certainly after were quite triumphant about, look, see, there was no problems. Well, early last week, wind power generation in the region plunged for 3 days straight while temperatures hovered around 100, and the electricity grid in Texas was under so much strain that Texas was the single most expensive place to buy power in the United States. Wholesale electric prices, for example, jumped up. This is not a typo, 36,000%, and reached as high as $9,000 a megawatt hour, and averaging over $6,500 a megawatt hour over Texas, with like the lowest price being $250 a megawatt hour. And just to give some context on what those numbers mean, at the same time in surrounding areas, you saw a range from 17 cents a megawatt hour, and I think that was in Louisiana, all the way up to about $61.95, I think, in the Chicago area. And so why were prices going so high? Well, it's because the supply of energy was so constrained in Texas, and that without those high energy prices, Texas would have had to resort to more aggressive energy deprivation measures in order to keep the lights on in Texas. And in fact, they actually did start to resort to some of those measures. So on Tuesday, the grid operator asked customers to voluntarily reduce their use of air conditioning, limit the amount of large appliances they were using, schedule pool pumps to run during off-peak times. And had things gotten any worse, Texas was ready to resort to telling businesses to shut down, which is called industrial demand response, which we've also talked about in the show, and ultimately resort to rotating outages. And so one of the things I want to stress from this story is that it's not like we face a choice between, oh, you have these widespread blackouts that completely bring the state to a standstill, or a grid to a standstill, and then everything else is just fine. That in order to avoid widespread blackouts, a grid overloaded with wind and solar, it has to resort to all sorts of painful measures, from high prices to voluntary energy deprivation to industrial energy deprivation to rotating energy outages, in order just to avoid a complete catastrophe. And one of the things I find really troubling is that these stories don't get a lot of attention, because these are warning signals. And it allows wind and solar supporters to go on and say, hey, look, there weren't any widespread blackouts, the system's fine. But actually what we're seeing is that it's becoming super vulnerable, particularly in closed grids like in Texas that can't easily trade, buy electricity from neighbors. And so, I mean, the basic principle is that, just because the patient didn't die doesn't mean that he was healthy.
Well, and we should probably think of what terminology to use, because you mentioned, I think, industrial demand response. There are all these euphemisms that are designed to cover up the truth. I think the term blackout should somehow be used. I mean, it's sort of like an industrial blackout or a targeted blackout or something like that. Yeah, I mean, if you just look at it, if you just even take the last 10 years, certainly the last 20 years, just obviously the capability of producing electricity has dramatically declined. And you think about what a negative achievement that is. I mean, both because electricity is so important, but also just it's not like we've learned less. It's not like we've unlearned how to produce electricity reliably. We know much more, and in fact, we have better ability to produce coal and gas more efficiently. So if anything, we should have higher reliability, lower prices. But because of this insistence on wind, in particular in Texas, we have something that's degrading dramatically in performance, and you're already having these mini blackouts or industrial blackouts. And you can talk about it as, well, the patient hasn't died, but if you make a person like chronically ill, then it is killing them in a certain way. I mean, everybody your life is measured in time. So you can think of it as, you're losing time in which you can really live. And then I think it's even stronger than that analogy, because what's actually happening is people's productive ability is being throttled. I mean, you can, in a sense, their life ability, if you think about all the role of machines in their lives, but you just think about industrial, and this is their ability to produce different kinds of important goods that people regard as crucial to their lives. And that means that they can't produce as many of them, or that they are going to be more expensive, or in some way they'll end up being lower quality. So you're throttling the productive ability of a whole area of the country, and that's going to have negative consequences throughout. So I'm glad that you are bringing this story to people's attention, and I think that this is something that could be really publicized a lot more, and be good to think about what we can do to publicize it more.